Go on enough unsuccessful hunts, and you'll get real familiar with the phrase, "It's just good to be out here." In this episode, in the spirit of Thanksgiving, we're going to reflect on some of the ways we've got it good. Hey everybody, Samuel Allred here. Welcome back to the Persistence Outdoors podcast. Over the years, I've been on many unsuccessful hunts. If you've listened to the podcast, you may know that I hunted elk for about 10 seasons before ever killing an elk. Or you may know that I go out in the spring and for the last 2 years have either seen bears and not been able to kill them or not seen any bears at all. More recently, I went on a hunt in northeastern Washington with some of my family, and I didn't have a tag, but I was along for the ride, and there were no opportunities to kill deer in the 3 days we were out there. And so most of my hunting experience is being unsuccessful. And I think for anybody starting out, it's going to be that way. And even for people who are experienced hunters, likely most of the time that you're hunting is going to be time where you're not experiencing success. And so this can be very challenging, but I think it actually grows us as people. You know, we could give up and quit when we're not experiencing success. And there are times when I'm out in the field and I'm thinking, why am I doing this? I'm wasting so much time. I could be at home with my wife or visiting with friends and family. I could be at work making money, whatever it is. But instead, I decided to come here and sit in this spot and glass a hill for 8 hours and I haven't seen anything. What am I doing? So that's one stage of it, right? Being unsuccessful and just thinking, what is going on? But usually after that frustration, if I can push through it, I get to a point where I start thinking, it's just good to be out here. It's a place where I'm no longer struggling with the hunt. Of course, I'm still going to do the things I need to do to be successful, but I'm no longer struggling with the things that I can't control. And I'm instead appreciating all of the things that have brought me to that place and all the things that I get to enjoy, and remembering that I've been privileged to be able to go out and sit on a hillside and glass another hillside for 8 hours. Not everybody gets to do that, and the experience in and of itself can be reward enough for the effort if you let it be. So all of a sudden, when you get into this brain space, you start thinking about, wow, this is a gorgeous sunset that I'm watching as I'm glassing. Or you think about all the other animals you see. Maybe they're not your target animal, but you've been able to interact with wildlife in a way that you wouldn't have been able to if you were just in the city or commuting to work or whatever it is. And then you notice the plants around you are beautiful and the mountains you're in are breathtaking. And there's this whole level of gratitude that you can start to experience. And in some ways, it's really all about your mindset. Now, this experience doesn't end in the field. It can actually help you when you go home as well. You're sitting out in the cold, for example, and you're freezing your butt off, and you go home and suddenly you appreciate a little bit more that you have warm water coming out of your shower head, you have heat in the house, you don't have to be cold all the time, right? Or you are building a fire and struggling with building a fire, and then you go home and you can just flick on a light switch and turn on the stove, and you don't even need a fire. Or you're rapidly digging a hole, right, so that you can poop in it, and then you have to cover it up and use hand sanitizer. But then you go home and you can just flush the toilet and wash your hands. And so having this comparison actually makes us more grateful for the things we have in normal life. So that's my take on it. I've been thinking about all of these things because Thanksgiving is coming up in a few days. And so I wanted to do an episode where I focus on some of the things that I'm grateful for, specifically in relation to hunting. So we're going to talk about public land, we're going to talk about conservation efforts, the Second Amendment, freezers and refrigeration. That's kind of a funny one. And then family and friends and how they're related to hunting and why I'm grateful for them. And I think many of you will resonate with my perspective as well. Guys, before we get into it, I just want to say how thankful I am for all of you who listen to and support the podcast. I put a lot of work into this podcast, so I'm proud to see it grow, but you guys are the inspiration for all the content. And I know for a fact that this podcast is helping people get into hunting. And you, as listeners, are a big part of that. One good example is this. When you have questions, other people likely have them too. And if I can answer those questions for you, chances are it's helping somebody else as well. And also, when you listen to the podcast, quite frankly, it helps the algorithm so the podcast will be suggested to new listeners. And so all that to say, I could publish an episode every week, but it wouldn't be worth anything without you listeners. So thank you, and together we'll continue to help more people get outside and into hunting. All right, so I've got 5 things listed out that I'm thankful for, and they're in no particular order, but we'll start with public land. If you enjoy hunting, fishing, camping, foraging, if you just enjoy the beauty of nature or having some solitude, if you enjoy wildlife, then public land is for you. And one of the things that I point out to people is that public land like this doesn't exist in many other countries. The US is blessed with these incredible natural resources and so much of it. And some other places just don't have that. And so the fact that we have public land and that we can hunt on it, not only does it exist, but we can also hunt on it, is incredible, and it's special to the United States. So I'm super thankful for that because I spend the vast majority of my time hunting on public land. And I live in an apartment right now. I don't even own a home, right? So I don't own any land. And if public land wasn't available, there's a good chance that I wouldn't have opportunities to hunt. Kind of as a side note, public land is always funny to me, and I haven't completely figured it out. Because in many ways, I am pro private land ownership. In many ways, I'm pro free markets and all of these things. But then when it comes to public land, it's like I become a socialist. I'm like, it's everybody's, everybody owns it, everybody contributes the same amount. And so I don't know how to reconcile it with all of my beliefs, I suppose. But I do value the opportunities that public land provides us, and I value the resource. And the way we have it set up right now seems to be, at least in the near term, the best way to kind of manage it and protect it. And so as much as it may seem a little bit socialist, I'm very pro public land, and I'm thankful that I have access to it. Now, the second thing I'm thankful for is conservation, and really the conservation efforts of the hunters and anglers that have come before me. I really like animals. I always have. I liked them as a kid. I like them now. And it's not in the way that maybe a dog lover likes animals. I don't like animals licking my face or anything, but I love watching them. I love learning about them. I think they're beautiful. I think they're fascinating. And it's not an accident that we have abundant wild game populations today. If you look back at historical records, if you look back into the late 1800s or the early 1900s, you'll find that common game species like white-tailed deer and duck populations were extremely low. And when you think about people today talking about the good old days, it's like, oh, back when I was a kid, there was more deer to hunt and we killed ducks every year. Well, back then in the late 1800s and early 1900s, many common game species had been hunted nearly to extinction. And so it was only through the work of conservationists that those populations have rebounded. And today we have healthy wild game populations. And even with lots of hunters and modern weapons, we're still able to maintain those populations in a way that allows many people to have the opportunity to hunt. And so I have a lot of appreciation for the hunters and anglers who didn't know me, but they put in the effort to conserve these animals for future generations. And I think that is passed on to us as hunters and anglers to conserve the resource for, once again, future generations. This is also a reason why we need new hunters. Hunters do more for wild game populations than anybody else because we have a vested interest in those populations sticking around. And if we want hunting to continue into the future and we want to have animals to hunt even, we have to have new people continually buying in and helping us with our conservation efforts. So keep that all in mind next time you're hunting and either you're successful or you just see a lot of animals. You know, it's not an accident. There are people who have put in a lot of work for our wild places to be this way, and you can make a difference for future generations as well. The next thing I'm thankful for is the Second Amendment. Here in the US, the Second Amendment gives us the right to bear arms. And in some ways, as an American, it's kind of baked into our culture. Obviously, I'm pro owning guns and I own them for hunting and self-defense. But beyond that, I find shooting to be fascinating because of how it relates to our instinctive humanity, let's say. And so let me explain. Before we were shooting rifles, we were shooting bows and arrows. And before we were shooting bows and arrows, we were throwing things, whether that was throwing spears or sticks or rocks. And it's always been a part of the human experience to throw or shoot something and hit a target. And it's been part of our hunting experience as well for, thousands and thousands of years. And so it's really fascinating because when you go out and shoot a gun and hit a target and you get some sort of feedback telling you that you hit that target where you meant to, there's just a very deep satisfaction that comes along with that. And I think that's baked into us. I don't think it's just about the skill that we've learned. I think that we really like hitting the target. And that's been there since we started throwing rocks thousands of years ago. So if you haven't tried shooting before, go try it out. It's very enjoyable. And whatever your purpose for learning to shoot is, I think there is just an inherent satisfaction in hitting your target that just about anybody will experience. Now, another thought I have that's not directly related to me being thankful for guns and hunting rifles, but I think is interesting, is that modern hunting is always a practice in restraint. So what I mean is that if we wanted to kill deer in the most effective way possible, we wouldn't be using modern hunting rifles. We would be using automatic weapons, or we would be using drones and thermal imagery. But instead, modern hunters practice restraint. And this practice of restraint ties into the tradition of hunting. Some people like to hunt with bows, and that's even more traditional and more historical. Also, it ties into the conservation efforts that we talked about before. We've built a system where we know that if hunters use restraint, we will be able to hunt well into the future. And so I just find it interesting that we're never using the most effective way to kill animals that we could, or the most effective way to harvest animals that we could, and yet we still go out and do it. And there's value in doing something the way it's been done, in the tradition of it, value in understanding the past, and even hunting with a modern hunting rifle is a practice constrained by the past. All right, the fourth thing I'm thankful for are freezers and refrigeration. And this might sound a little bit funny, but if you think about the modern diet, it's built around having access to refrigeration. Many of the things that people had to do in the past, like salting meat or smoking meat, or even in the more recent past, canning, doing things to preserve goods, we don't really have to do anymore because we have freezers and refrigeration. Now, we may still do it because it tastes good or it is handy to have some things in the pantry instead of the fridge. I get that. But just think about how your experience would be different after killing a deer if you had to dry most of that meat instead of just putting it in your freezer. When I kill a deer or an elk in the fall, then I can have it in the freezer and I can have steaks or stew meat pretty much any time I want throughout the year. And that's just a wonderful thing. Not exactly the same, but I used to live in Phoenix, Arizona, and I used to marvel at how there was an entire city built there, and most of the people stayed inside for 70% of the year because it was so hot. And so they would stay inside and stay in the air conditioning. And I always thought about how many people would live there if there was no air conditioning. And truly, I can't imagine most people in Arizona or in Phoenix specifically wanting to live there without air conditioning. And so it's kind of the same thing. I mean, freezers and refrigerators have totally changed the way that humans live. And just like the air conditioning in Phoenix, they make our lives so much easier. Right up there with freezers and refrigerators are coolers. With coolers, we can go on hunts that we wouldn't have even considered without the cooler, right? So think about an August pronghorn hunt, and you've got a long drive home after your hunt. Well, where are you going to put the meat? If you don't have a cooler, there's a good chance that that meat is going to spoil. Or think about a late spring, early summer black bear hunt, and you want to save that hide, and you don't want the hair to slip. You also want to save the meat, right? And if you didn't have a cooler, you might not even consider that hunt, because if you think through it before your hunt like you should, you would understand that you have no way to preserve the harvest. So coolers are amazing. I really appreciate them, and they open up so many opportunities for hunters. All right, any list like this would not be complete without mentioning family and friends. For me personally, hunting has always been something that I do with family. Now, there are plenty of times when I hunt by myself, but when I started hunting, it was with family. And then almost every year, I get a chance to go hunting with family and friends. And there's something about the challenge, the quantity of time, the tradition, the food that makes it a very special experience for everybody involved. I've found that I tend to build good relationships over some sort of challenge or even suffering. So I think back to my high school days, and some of the people I was closest with were on the cross country team. So we would go out and run together. We would suffer through workouts together. And I think for me, I could see them persevering through challenging moments, and it made it feel like I could trust them in other parts of my life. And also, we had this shared experience together that really nobody else had that same experience. And so all of these things come together to forge closer relationships. And I think you have all of that in hunting. With hunting, you're often going to go out and deal with failure. You're going to spend days out there looking for an animal and not have any opportunities. Or even worse, you're not going to see any animals. And you start to understand the type of people you're with when you see them experience failure and then lace up their boots and go out and give it another try. And it also helps you become a better person, right? Every time you experience failure and with the encouragement of the people around you, you decide to go and give it another try, you build some character and you become stronger and more resilient. Another aspect of hunting that lends itself to building relationships is escaping for a while from the modern world, or just being a little bit removed from it. So if you're out on a hunting trip for a few days, maybe you don't have cell service, and you really have to focus on the people who are next to you, or you have to focus on the hunt, and you're not being bothered by all of sort of the small concerns of the modern world. You're not thinking about what's on Instagram. You're not thinking about your email. You're not really thinking about what you're wearing. And having some of these things go away lets you focus on some of the things that matter more. And often the things that matter most are relationships. If you're close with your family, hunting is a great way to spend time together. And if you're successful, you will be able to enjoy a meal together from the animal that you hunted, and that is special in and of itself. If you're not close with your family, hunting is still a great way to make friends. And I think that if you asked most hunters, they would attest to the fact that family and friends are a big part of their hunting experience, and sometimes even more important than the hunt itself. Okay, guys. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. It's a little bit different than what we normally do, but I thought it was appropriate with Thanksgiving coming up. If you take anything away from this episode, just remember that we've got it good here in the US. We've got the public land. We've had generations of conservationists before us. We have the Second Amendment. And secondly, remember that hunting isn't always just about hunting. Being successful is not the most important thing. Sure, I want to be successful and I'm going to work to be successful. And I think that's part of the challenge and the appeal of hunting. But there's so much around it. There's so much tradition and there's so many relationships and so many different aspects of hunting that are also important. And we should never lose sight of that. I hope you all have a wonderful Thanksgiving, and I will catch you on the next one.